Is the commander good? That might seem like a really odd question to ask if you've been reading this novel. I mean, how can he be good, right? It almost seems laughable. But he seems to really want to know Offred. He invites her to the library. He plays Scrabble with her. He talks to her. He seems to want some sort of actual interpersonal connection, some sort of intimacy, some sort of humanity. Is there goodness in him? Is he perhaps not such a bad guy after all? This is a really interesting question, especially in the way that Atwood handles it. She, on pages 145 to 146, starts to consider the idea of men and monsters. And to appreciate this, it's important to know a little bit about Hannah Arendt and her book Eichmann in Jerusalem, in which she talks about the banality of evil and the ways in which we create men into monsters to try to separate kind of the atrocious things we can't even imagine how humans can do to each other from everyday life as a way almost of keeping us safe. But her thesis in the book is not that, but rather that evil is within all of us, that we are all capable of doing horrible, horrible things to each other. And so Atwood, on pages 145 and 146, as she explores the possibility of the commander's goodness, she brings up this idea of World War II and the Holocaust through thinking about ovens. Offred is remembering a time when she was a child and she was watching a documentary on TV, and they were interviewing a woman who had been the mistress of a man who had supervised one of the camps where they had put the Jews before they killed them. In ovens, my mother said, but there weren't any pictures of the ovens, so I got some confused notion that these deaths had taken place in kitchens. There is something especially terrifying to a child in that idea. Ovens mean cooking, and cooking comes before eating. I thought that these people had been eaten, which in a way I suppose they had been. Earlier in this same chapter, Offred describes herself in different food ways, and she even talks about herself as cotton candy that's been mushed. As the interview goes on, Offred recalls that the mistress, the woman, said she didn't notice much that she'd found unusual. Their swimming pool was beside their house, which was near the camp with the ovens, but she denied knowing about the ovens. At the time of the interview, 40 or 50 years later, she was dying of emphysema. She coughed a lot. Atwood is expecting you, dear reader, to put together the sort of smoke that was in her lungs. From the cigarettes? From the ovens? What has caused the cancer that is eating at her insides? And then we get to the line, he was not a monster, she said. People say he was a monster, but he was not one. A couple lines later, she did not believe he was a monster. He was not a monster to her. And then Offred reflects, probably he had some endearing trait. He whistled off-key in the shower. He had a yen for truffles. He called his dog Liebken and made it sit up for pieces of raw steak. How easy it is to invent a humanity for anyone at all. What an available temptation. The commander is kind to Offred. He makes her life bearable. In fact, he makes her life so bearable that the entire narrative starts to pick up an energy after she begins meeting with him in the library. And to his credit, or maybe not credit, to his defense, although that also doesn't seem like the right word, let's just say he claims he doesn't know what their lives are really like. He claims that he is ignorant of many of the circumstances of their existence. So maybe he just simply doesn't know. And then he takes her out one night too. Maybe there's goodness there. She is quite excited for the change to the everyday after all. And they go to Jezebel's. She gets to wear something different. Granted, it's a sort of adult cosplay outfit, and she gets to wear makeup, but of course Jezebel's turns out to be a club. Really a sort of high-class whorehouse for the commanders, and visiting foreign dignitaries and such. Offred says she wants to know. She wants to know what Gilead is all about. And the commander tells her what it's all about. He shows her what it's all about. He takes her to Jezebel's. And then we get to the hotel room. He takes her up the elevator and into the room. And he says that the ceremony's tomorrow, isn't it? Page 254. I thought we could jump the gun. He turns toward me. Why did you bring me here? I say coldly. He is stroking my body now, from stem to stern, a cat stroke along the left flank down the leg. He stops at the foot, his fingers encircling the anklet briefly like a bracelet where the tattoo is. A braille he can read, a cattle brand. It means ownership. I remind myself that he is not an unkind man. That under other circumstances, I even like him. His hand pauses. I thought you might enjoy it for a change. He knows that isn't enough. I guess it was a sort of experiment? That isn't enough either. You said you wanted to know. He's answering her. This is what Gilead is about. It is not about the handmaids and the wives and all of that. It is about the slow and subtle grooming that gets Offred to a hotel room, that gets her to a place where she can say, I actually like him under other circumstances. And on the next page, he's not a monster. Is she inventing a humanity for the commander? Or is she recognizing what is all too frightening in this book? That the commander really is a human being. That for all of that, for his jocular joking, for his silliness in bringing her to the club, for his attempts at kindness with Scrabble, he's just a guy. Just trying maybe even to make her life a little bit more bearable, but in trying to make it a little bit more bearable, actually wielding his power in such a way as to manipulate her further? Does he even know he's doing it? It's easy to make the commander into a monster, and part of me wants to. But part of me knows that we can't, because to say that he is a monster is to fall for the lie that we can neatly divide people into such categories. It's to deny the potential for great evil that lurks in every single one of us. And it's when we start doing that, when we start denying each other's humanity, even for the most atrocious things, that we start down the path to all sorts of evil ourselves. Is the commander good? I don't know. But he's not a monster. And in his misguided way, maybe he is striving for goodness. And maybe that's the scariest thing of all.